Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Lauren. I am starting off this vlog in quarantine and hopefully we will finish outside of quarantine, but this is my birth vlog. I am a psychic, I am a medium, animal communicator, all that good stuff. And a lot of that has shaped who I am and how I live my life. And so I wanted to create a series on how to connect with your baby, how to have an intuitive pregnancy, how to use psychic development exercises to connect with your baby, connect with yourself, and basically have an easier pregnancy. So this video specifically, I'm going to be talking about how I prepped for birth, how my birth itself, and sort of the aftermath of it, and kind of how it all goes down. Basically, my whole third trimester has been the whole coronavirus pandemic. If you want to see more about that, check out the previous video. That is my whole pregnancy basically, and all the things that I've done to connect with baby and do psychic exercises during pregnancy. So I've sort of done a video already on the different types of birth options that are out there. I actually created this video like years and years ago. So you can check that out in the link below. But it's basically, I threw it into this playlist because I wanted it to still be a resource for you guys. So if you aren't sure if you should be at a birth center or have a home birth or have a hospital birth, I sort of describe the differences between them and sort of give my recommendations. So if you watched the last video, you'll know that I'm going to be at a birth center, which makes me feel so much better during this whole pandemic thing that I don't have to deal with hospitals. So as I am approaching birth, I would highly recommend, even if you are not going with a birth center, to educate yourself about the process. I have attended friends' births who refuse to educate themselves, and I think because of it, they had a lot harder time because they didn't know what to expect. And I understand that the fear of it can sort of push you away from wanting to learn, but there are so many great resources out there that you can access and make you feel just reassured in general. So I'm going to go over the biggest things that have helped me in prepping for birth. The first thing is books, and I have literally read every book under the sun. At one point I thought I was going to be a nurse midwife, so I literally know it all. And I've read it all. But I would say the 3 books that you should really just focus on is Hypnobirthing, Ina May's Guide to Childbirth, and the Pregnancy Encyclopedia. If your OB does not offer classes, I would highly recommend going out of your way to find childbirth classes. There's a lot of places, a lot of stores, a lot of sort of like mom and pop shops that offer classes, and this has honestly been the biggest help in my pregnancy. Because we've been in quarantine, a lot of my classes have had to been online, unfortunately. But even though they've been online, they have reduced my stress level and my anxiety about labor so much. Now, do not get me wrong, there are still some parts of labor that I am scared of, but I would say having done these classes, having read these books, I have gone from maybe 80% scared to 40% scared. Maybe 30. I would give it a 30. So I'm feeling super confident, even though I'm in the middle of a pandemic and I'm going to be giving birth during that. I'm super happy about my choice of birth center and how I've been educating myself and prepping for birth. So I am currently 8 months pregnant, almost to the day. I've got a month-ish left. Who knows? It could happen 2 weeks before, 2 weeks after that. I don't think I will be vlogging my birth just because my husband is the only other person allowed with me in the birth center at this time. I'm very excited to see how this video ends. As of right now, I have never had kids. This is my first little boy. I'm so excited to meet him. I can't even tell you guys. And hopefully he'll be here in a month and I'll walk you through my birth. "82 hours. 82. I mean, it's worth it, but 82. You can't do that during my vlog. Mostly, I want to talk about the intuitive, psychic side of my birth, if that's even a thing. Just some experiences I had and questions around that. But I have to give a little bit of background just to explain some of that. But mostly, I want to keep it positive. I don't have footage of my actual birth. This is mostly just me talking. So if you're looking for that, probably go elsewhere. But yeah, I want to focus mostly on the intuitive aspect of it. 82 hours. I didn't know births could last that long, but apparently they can. So I gave birth at a birth center. On the positive side, I didn't have to deal with the hospitals during a pandemic. I'm super glad that I didn't have to do that, because 82 hours, I'm sure I would have ended up with a C-section, just because the nature of hospitals, they don't like to wait. And I think most births we're used to happening so quickly, and that's because of all of the drugs. But the 82-hour thing, I guess, is apparently pretty normal, especially for unmedicated births. However, if I would have known that going in, I might have done things a little differently. So even though the negative of being in the birth center was that I couldn't speed up that process with any drugs or any of that, I think it was more of a positive because I avoided the C-section. I avoided all the craziness that would have happened having been in a hospital during a pandemic. Who knows what that looks like? And I thankfully had the space and the comfort of being in an environment that was really great, and I just don't know what the hospitals would have been like, or if I would have been pushed to do a C-section, which I really would have regretted equally. So one of the downsides, I think, was only being able to have my husband, even though I planned it that way. Halfway through, I probably would have really liked to have like my mom show up, because I was just so out of it. Originally I was like, oh, well, I don't want anybody to see me naked, but really that like goes out of the window after like so long. And the downside was I couldn't have anybody just come to the birth center because of the pandemic. So really that was a lot to put on my husband, he being my only emotional support. And the great thing about the midwives is they were much better than, nurses or hospital staff, because they're there with you the whole time. So I'm really appreciative that I at least had them. But I think moving forward in the future, pandemic or none, definitely bring somebody into the space that's more than just one person, because that's a lot to put on one person. And my husband took all the classes, all the hypnobirthing classes with us. He was super prepared. But it was just a lot for him to handle me and to handle the situation. And so I think that was definitely a downside. So if you've watched my previous video on hospitals versus birth centers versus home births, you probably saw me pretty pushing the home birth and the birth center. I think my viewpoints have definitely changed on that, especially knowing how long that my birth was. I think next time around, I'm definitely going to go to a hospital, because just the sheer exhaustion and the ability to not move things along quicker was a real problem for me. And I think just because of my body and how slow I had of a time this first birth, I think next kids I'm probably going to go to a hospital. Even though I absolutely love the environment and the people of the birth center, I think I'm going to try to find a very midwife heavy or very open hospital that are willing to do some of the things that I want to do. But just purely because of how long it took, I do not think it was worth it for me to go back to a birth center next time. It was just the exhaustion by day 3 or 4. I don't even know how many 82 hours is. It was tough. So that's kind of the background of my birth. I didn't want to go too in depth with it because I wanted this series to be more about psychic abilities and, the intuitive part of giving birth, which is kind of like, how do we even approach that? But I would say overall, using your intuition in the birth room is very hard, because the act of giving birth is just so, it's so physical. It's so earthbound. Like I feel like I had a very hard time even connecting to that side of myself. I think at the very least, having the toolbox of the hypnobirthing courses, which are honestly just breathing exercises, is what hypnobirthing is. Just having that in my back pocket was helpful to come back to. But honestly, once you get into that zone, at least for me, all of that just went out of the window. I had affirmations printed, I had music ready to go, I had meditations ready to go. Even I tried to go back to some of the meditations and they were just annoying and I couldn't do it. So I think personally for me, even though I'm psychic and I do this stuff all the time, it was very hard for me to get into that headspace. And it was just very physical. So I didn't have much connecting of my guides or pulling of tarot cards mid-birth. It was not on the forefront of my mind. So of course, when everything was starting, I wanted to know, when am I going to go into labor? When am I going to go into labor? Like, once you get down to the end of it, it's just like, that's all you can think about. And so I was constantly asking my guides, and I constantly had the feeling, oh, it's today. It's going to be today. It's going to be this weekend. It's going to be next weekend. And every single time I was wrong. One of the signs, though, that I did get was my grandfather coming in. And so if you watched my video of getting pregnant, my grandfather came in kind of when I was testing. I can't remember if I said it in the video, but when I was testing, my grandfather came in and was kind of like, yeah, this is it. This is going to happen. And so the night before I went into labor, I was kind of sitting here in the living room and my grandpa showed up and he was like, it's happening soon. And I was like, all right, and I didn't believe it because I had so many signs or gut feelings and I had ignored them and some of them didn't happen. But when he showed up, I took it a little more seriously. And of course that night I went into labor. There's a quote around like birth and labor that says something to the effect of, when women birth, they leave their bodies and go fetch their children's souls from the universe or something like that. And I kind of always have had that in the back of my mind, and I was curious if that was going to happen to me. I don't feel like birth was like any sort of out of body experience. Like, there wasn't like moments where I just wasn't there or wasn't present. I think, again, that physical nature of the whole process. Oh yeah? It didn't allow for me to get into a meditative state. I mean, definitely towards the beginning, but, by the end of it, I was just so not even there. I think the closest thing I had was, time definitely passed very quickly and I had no sense of time. I think that was partly because I wasn't concentrating on the time. And I did have a sort of like a vision, a very clairvoyant vision where, it was very close to when I was almost done with labor. Like, my husband was passed out next to me. It was that long. And the midwives had stepped out for a second. And I was kind of all by myself. And I was in a really low, really scared place. And I was just very negative. Oh, yeah? Oh, are you telling me it's okay? Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I don't want to get into it because it's a negative thing for me, and I truly believe in spreading positive birth stories. I don't think it's helpful at all to share negative birth stories at all, so I'm kind of leaving those parts out for those who are watching, who are going to give birth and want to keep that positive mindset. But it was just a very negative vision, and basically I knew, kind of pulling out of it, I was like, whoa, what was that? And that was the one time I talked to my guides, and it was like, all right, you are very low, you're being very negative, you are attracting this negativity, you gotta stay positive. And so I think that was helpful, because from then on I was like, I don't want that to happen again. I'm holding this positive intention. And I had him a few hours later. So one thing that my friend asked me afterwards was, when did I think his soul kind of came into his body? But I kind of told her I felt like he really came through in my second or third trimester. In like the first part of my pregnancy, whenever I talked to him, I felt like he was kind of in front of me, in the space in front of me, as if he were like a spirit that I was talking to. But then towards the end of my pregnancy, I felt like I was going more inwards. And so that's kind of where my feeling is, of where I think his soul integrated with the body. I have no idea. Oh, am I wrong? Am I right? I mean, gut feeling right now I'm getting is that it might be different for everybody, but definitely when he came out and afterwards, I already felt like his soul was totally there before. So just a curious little tidbit. I thought that would be fun to share because my best friend asked me, and I thought it might spark some interesting conversation. The last thing that happened to me was more after my birth. So there was definitely some trauma that I had from that birth. I mean, being in labor for 82 hours is gonna create some trauma. And there was a lot of things that I was fighting during birth, you know, mostly because of the time. I was like, this isn't normal, this isn't normal. And because of that, I think my mental state, I was prolonging the birth as well because I was fighting it. And I was like, this isn't supposed to be happening, this isn't supposed to be happening. And so after my birth, I definitely had a spirit that was kind of following me around. And it was a negative spirit. It was kind of scary. And it was one that I had manifested. It wasn't like a spirit that was attached to my house or attached to anything. If you've seen my other video, I kind of talk about how spirits can be created or manifested. So check that out. But this spirit definitely was created by me from ignoring all the trauma of my birth. So like the first 2 weeks, I was just trying to ignore what happened, deny what happened. And when I talked about my birth to other people, I was only focusing on the negative. And so I got really tired of this spirit because I couldn't get rid of it. And normally that's not the case for me because I'm very good about my boundaries and keeping spirits out. And so I was like, what is the deal? Why is this spirit so different? And I realized it's because it's attached to me. It's because it's a manifestation of my thoughts, that I was having a lot harder time with it. And so once I talked to my guys and I was like, what's going on? I was like, oh, okay, I know how to deal with this. I need to not ignore the birth. I need to work through it. So basically I just journaled. I put everything down on paper, all the negatives, everything that happened, and I just got it out. And it was a very healing process for me, especially because towards the end, I only focused on the positives of the birth experience, and I wrote out everything that went well and everything that was good and everything that was great. And so therefore I could let go, but not forget about all of the negative traumatic things and only focus on the positive things. But yeah, my biggest piece of advice would definitely be to remember to heal the negative. After your birth is over, I think this is why there's so many negative birth stories out there, is because we think this is the way to heal from them, is just by sharing the negative. But I really think that, and I mean, I'm not saying bottle it up or don't ever talk about it. You can definitely talk about it to a few people. But I think it's more important to focus on the positives. For me, you know, yeah, it was an 82-hour birth. It was during a pandemic. It was all of these things negative. But I choose to focus on the fact that I was strong, even though it was an unmedicated birth. I avoided a C-section. I think there's just a lot of positive things that I've focused on. And so I've changed that story. I think it's just super important at the end of the day to make sure you heal from any negative experiences you had in the birth room. And so moving forward, focusing on the positive is definitely, I don't know, I think just the mental health behind it is going to help with all of your psychic stuff and trusting your intuition. But hopefully some of those tips will help you guys if you are going through the birth process and you're curious on, you know, things you can look out for, things you can do during and after the process to have a positive experience. The last video of this series, I'm basically going to be giving tips, exercises, tools that you can use for your psychic ability, for intuitive use in dealing with newborns. Just kind of how to navigate the first couple of months and how to use your intuition in that process. So check out that next video in the series. I hope I have some interesting stuff to talk about, and I think moving forward, as I discover kind of what it's like to be a parent, I'm going to have videos here and there of having kids and dealing with psychic abilities, and both in him and myself, and figuring all of that out together. So thanks for watching, you guys, and I hope to see you in the next video.